Okay, so now let me turn to the capstone award for the NAS Honors Ceremony, the presentation of our Public Welfare Medal. The Academy's Public Welfare Medal is our most prestigious award and is presented annually to honor extraordinary use of science for the public good. This year, the medal is awarded to Professor Nancy Hopkins from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Of course, Nancy is an outstanding researcher in her own right. She's a member of both the NAS and the NAM, and has been widely recognized and honored for her work using genetics to study cancer in mice and vertebrate development in zebrafish. But the Public Welfare Medal is something different. No remarkable basic research discoveries will earn a scientist this honor. Rather, recipients must have reached beyond science discovery by performing actions that benefit the public good. Specifically, Nancy is being honored for her courageous work to advance equal opportunity for women in science. Her citation reads, "For her courageous leadership over 3 decades in illuminating the unequal treatment of women in science and for her efforts to create and ensure equal opportunity." I recall as though it was yesterday, the day that Nancy Hopkins showed up in a lab at MIT that Lee Royden and I shared in the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences. Nancy was there from the biology department to learn whether the disadvantages for women that she was documenting in the biology department were more widely shared at MIT across the entire School of Science. Now, I don't believe that either Lee Royden or I at the time felt that we were poorly treated. Just like Nancy has often said, every day we thought we were so lucky to be working at such a fabulous institution with such great students and such wonderful colleagues and superior opportunities. But as Nancy started telling us, her carefully documented, quantified findings of inequality, Lee and I started reflecting on some of the subtle ways that women in our own department fail to get the same accommodation as our male peers. The size of our offices, the size of our labs, the prestige of the committee assignments we were given, and even salary differentials. Nancy eventually pulled together similar data to what she had for biology for all the departments in the MIT School of Science, except for the math department, which didn't have any women, so it had no one to treat unequally. But the disparities in all the other departments were significant and unexplained by differences in stature of the women compared to their male colleagues as assessed by outside referees. The fact that Nancy was not an activist made her investigations that much more meaningful. And the fact that they were quantified meant that she was speaking a language that the MIT administration would understand. And understand they did. Dean Bob Bergeneau and President Charles Vest used Nancy's observations as a basis for their own investigations that supported her findings and conclusions. Inequities were addressed at MIT as a result. Lee Royden told me that as a result of this, she got a major salary boost that brought her up to parity with men in our department at her same level of seniority. And thanks to the great reporting of her nominator, Kate Zernike, at the Boston Globe at the time, the MIT stand to support women scientists was widely circulated and became literally a shot heard around the world in true Massachusetts fashion. Nancy's findings resonated with women across the nation. Universities everywhere started to re-examine their treatment of women and correct for decades of inequality. Kate went on to document Nancy's crusade in a best-selling book entitled The Exceptions. The title relates to the fact that as late as 1999, women who exceeded in science were called exceptional, as if it were unusual for a woman to be able to succeed in science. As Kate points out, they were exceptional, but not because they could succeed at science, but because they all accomplished what they were able to and meet the challenges of thriving in science despite the added hurdles they had to overcome. Nancy's leadership in this movement was instrumental to her success and the success of the entire movement. The small retractable tape measure that Nancy went building to building, documenting the smaller size of offices in labs for women, is now enshrined in the MIT Museum to remind us of the importance of science being a meritocracy, regardless of gender, race, or any other irrelevant attributes. And now Nancy Hopkins' name will also be enshrined in the Pantheon of Public Welfare Medalists of the NAS. Nancy, we know that more than 2 decades have passed since your landmark efforts to address unequal treatment of women in academia. My only regret is this honor did not come sooner. Please take the stage and tell us your story, and particularly what new frontiers of equality still need to be addressed. Thank you.
Well, I first want to thank the National Academy of Sciences for this extraordinary honor. It's humbling to join the list of awardees. I'm also grateful beyond words to family, mentors, colleagues, MIT, and to countless women activists and men who made it possible for women of my generation to become scientists at America's great research institutions. I also feel tremendous gratitude to the Academy's leadership and selection committee for choosing to honor this line of work. I see your recognition of work on behalf of equality for women in science as a milestone in women's advancement, and I believe it will further accelerate women's progress as scientists and leaders. Thank you. How did I end up being a spokesperson for women in science? I wasn't even a feminist when I was young. I just wanted to be a scientist. So I'm going to tell you a very brief story of how, and then say a few words about where I think we are today. I fell in love with molecular biology at age 19 in a Harvard class taught by James D. Watson. In 1 hour, he convinced me that DNA was the secret of life. I raced to his office and asked to work in his lab, and he said yes, and he became my mentor. He encouraged me to become a scientist, and he helped make it possible. In college, I assumed the absence of women scientists on the Harvard faculty was because it was too difficult to combine a high-powered career with being the primary caretaker of a family. True, but also wrong. Women couldn't get faculty jobs in America's great research universities at that time. But enormous change was coming. The doors opened thanks to civil rights, women's liberation, and in 1972, Title IX, that prohibited discrimination against women by institutions that received federal funding. Just as I completed my postdoc training, universities were recruiting women to their faculties. Now talk about good timing. I joined the MIT faculty in 1973. I decided not to have children, so I didn't expect to encounter any obstacles because I was a woman. Science is a meritocracy. Why would gender matter? But it did, even for women who didn't have children. Most obstacles I encountered didn't bother me at first. For example, being told I couldn't teach an important undergraduate course because MIT students couldn't believe scientific information spoken by a woman. Everybody knows that. Or being told I couldn't co-found a biotech company with colleagues because businessmen won't work with women. Well, duh, okay. But other obstacles made it hard to do research. Was it just me? I started watching how other women professors were treated relative to men of comparable scientific accomplishment. After 20 years, I knew that an idea, a result, or a discovery was undervalued if it was made by a woman. The woman and her work might even be invisible. It was a brilliant insight. Years later, I learned I had simply rediscovered what psychologists had already discovered and called unconscious or implicit gender bias. It resulted from cultural assumptions and beliefs people don't even know they have. I tried to explain my brilliant insight to several well-intentioned administrators. It didn't go that well. They didn't get it, and I honestly couldn't blame them. I had to live it for 20 years to understand it. How could they? They were all men. Finally, I overcame my reluctance and talked to other tenured women science faculty. There were 16 of us who were women out of about 200 tenured science faculty. It was extremely embarrassing because I suspected the women thought, as I had for so long, that if you were really good enough, obstacles wouldn't matter. To my astonishment, almost every woman had figured it out too. We decided to work together to address the problem. Those women are the reason that I'm here today. One woman's problem, no matter how egregious, can usually be ascribed to its special circumstances. Together, the women's experiences revealed a pattern that defined a little understood form of discrimination. Now, at this moment, somebody is bound to be thinking, are you sure those women were really as good as those men? Yes, I am. Thank you for asking. 4 of the 16 women won the U.S. National Medal of Science. 11 were members of this academy. 3 would later become institute professors, MIT's highest faculty award. They looked like the top third or half of any typical MIT department. Over several months, the women talked, planned, plotted, and drafted a letter to MIT's Dean of Science, physicist Bob Birgeneau. We asked him to form a committee to examine the issues using MIT's own impeccable data to confirm or refute our perceptions of inequity. Birgeneau has described our meeting with him as a eureka moment. Seeing the women speaking as one, the pattern was instantly clear to him. He became our strong supporter and advocate. He established a committee that included 3 male department heads. One, a Nobel laureate, pressed me to write a detailed report so the dean could fix the documented inequities we found. And he did. The women were thrilled. However, we realized that this didn't change the underlying cause of inequities, and almost no one at MIT knew it had even happened because the women had worked in secrecy so as not to damage their careers. But in 1999, Lottie Balin, a professor at MIT's Sloan School, became the chair of the MIT faculty. She asked me to write a short summary of our work with Dean Birgeneau to share with all MIT faculty. MIT's President Charles Vest strongly endorsed the findings. Kate Zernike, a young reporter at the Boston Globe, got wind of this story, and it ended up on the front page of the newspaper. 2 days later, it was on page 1 of the New York Times. The public reaction overwhelmed us. Email poured in from women saying, "You won't believe it, the same thing happens to me and no one believes me." A few weeks later, I found myself shaking hands with President Bill and Hillary Clinton, who said, "Thank you on behalf of the nation." I said, "Oh, me? Are you speaking to me?" I was so surprised. And they urged all institutions to do data-driven gender equity studies like the MIT report. Soon I was asked to lecture on the report at universities, companies, to the government. The press called every day or lined up outside the office. I was running a national program out of my office, so I asked President Vest what to do about this. Vest had already ordered gender equity reports be done in all departments of MIT. Now he asked me to join the central administration and work with the provost and chancellor to help devise institutional solutions. And the effort was expanded to include underrepresented minority faculty. When the Council on Faculty Diversity was launched, Chuck Vest said to me, "Nancy, I don't know how to fix marginalization, but anything I can measure, I can fix." Very MIT. Under Provost Bob Brown's leadership with the Deans of Science and Engineering, senior women and minority faculty, and using data from MIT's superb Office of Institutional Research, we redesigned hiring practices, updated pay equity reviews, rewrote family leave policies, built daycare on campus, appointed women and minority faculty to powerful administrative roles, held a conference on the unique biases experienced by women of color, Shirley Malcolm's famous double bind. And President Vest invited the presidents of 8 other research universities to come to MIT to share data and best practices. Within a few years, MIT really was a different place. The next president of MIT was a woman. For women of my generation, the progress was breathtaking. There were babies on campus, babies. And junior women faculty could take family leave and get tenure rather than hiding their pregnancies as they used to. And the progress has been maintained. This year, MIT's president and provost had numerical data collected to mark the 25th anniversary of the 1999 report on women faculty. Salary, space, hiring rates, they're all equitable. And by the way, today, the president, the provost, the chancellor, and the dean of science at MIT are all women. So is everything fixed? Uh-oh. What about the marginalization of women from important professional opportunities that President Vest said he didn't know how to fix? Did MIT succeed in changing the unconscious biases and behaviors of 1,000 faculty? And what about the world outside MIT that impacts the institution and which is often very different from the culture within the university? Here's an example. While MIT was changing, a pretty good control experiment was running alongside. Namely, a biotech industry grew up around the university. MIT faculty played critical roles as founders of startup companies. Did I mention that 40 years ago I was told I couldn't participate because I was a woman? Did the industry change? 5 years ago, MIT's President Emerita, Susan Hockfield, and our colleague, Professor Sangeeta Bhatia, a bioengineer, and I decided to find out by looking at data and women faculty's experience in biotech. Guess what? The startup culture had hardly changed at all. Women faculty are seldom asked to be co-founders with male colleagues or serve on the boards of startups. When women pitch, they're advised to bring only male trainees with them. It might upset the venture capitalists. In just 7 MIT departments of science and engineering, if women faculty had founded companies at the same rate as men, today there would be 40 additional biotech and tech companies. In biology alone, of 56 faculty-founded companies, only 2 involved women. So now President Hockfield and Professor Bhatia work with MIT and Boston area venture capitalists to support women interested in founding startups. So the bottom line, behavioral change is really hard without powerful insider intervention. In my era, MIT's approach to gender equity was data-driven and policy-driven. Other institutions have done groundbreaking work more focused on changing the culture and identifying the underlying biases that lead to marginalization and undervaluation. And MIT has adopted these approaches in recent years. I'm thinking of the NSF Superb Advanced Program and the 2018 National Academy's report on sexual harassment, which had a huge impact, and Sea Change from AAAS and many others that have been groundbreaking. So how does science look today to younger women who are still in the trenches? This year, Kate Zernike, who's now at the New York Times, published a history of the MIT story called The Exceptions. I joined Kate on several stops of her book tour this year. So here are a few anecdotal observations from the self-selected attendees we met and hear from through email. Okay, so senior women faculty say, yes, there's been a lot of progress, but there's still a way to go. And the 2 key issues are still often greater family responsibilities for women and unconscious gender bias. Women of color still experience far greater marginalization than majority women, and huge effort is needed there. But wonderfully, women talk far more openly about these issues. They don't have to hide the fact that this is a real issue. By the way, I should warn you, some young women are very angry that in 2024, they still are talking about gender bias and even sexual harassment, for heaven's sakes. And they asked us, why hasn't anything changed? Youth, gotta love them, to a point. But really surprising and exciting for me was the reaction of many men to Kate Zernike's book. They told us they hadn't understood these issues until they read the exceptions, and now they want to participate in accelerating change. One Nobel laureate is on a crusade to recruit his colleagues to the cause. This is tremendously exciting, since only when women and men share power equally and address these issues together will we be done. I came away reminded that while social change is slow, it does happen, but not by itself. We can't change our own unconscious biases. But as Harvard's great psychologist Liz Spelke says, change the world and the biases will change with it. In closing, I want to thank the Academy again. There's been so much progress for women in science, but there's still more to do, and now is a time of backlash in society. You've sent a clear message that women are essential to America's scientific mission and excellence. It's a historic statement. I thank you.
Well, thank you all. You have been a wonderful audience. I think all of the awardees in this room must feel the love from all of you. Thank you. So the next event here is the garden party, which is slated to start at 4 p.m., but believe me, it will start as soon as you get there. So I'll see you all there, and let's give a final round of applause for all our awardees.